All right, this is how we make our chicken stock. We use our carcasses, our feet, some celery, onions, carrots, rosemary, thyme, and peppercorns. We're gonna prep all the ingredients. We're gonna cut up the carrots and cut up the celery and the onions and put everything into the stock pot and cover it with water, basically. It's very, very easy, and you just let it cook low on the stove all day. So here we are again, getting everything prepared to put into the pot. The carrots, there's a carcass. We're gonna throw that in there. Sometimes you have to squish it down to make sure it's gonna fit. Yep, I think we fit about 6 carcasses in here each time that we make it. And a whole bag of feet. I'm not sure how many feet there are, but feet are really great to include because they have a lot of extra collagen. So if you can stomach the thought, it's really good to add that to your chicken stock. Throw some herbs in there to make sure it gets blended in all different spots while it's cooking. And this was really great because it freed up a lot of freezer space for us, because not that we need it right now, but it's good to have more space if we need it. And we're just gonna clean up all of our scraps there. We already cleaned up the onion scraps, but here's the carrot scraps. We're just gonna give them to our chickens. Put the peppercorns on over top of the stock pot. We really just kind of eyeball it. There's really no measurements to this. And then we fill it with a little bit more water. That pot filler is a genius idea. If you don't already have one in your kitchen and you're redoing your kitchen, I highly recommend getting a pot filler because it's very convenient, especially when you're doing big, heavy projects with giant pots like this and you need to fill them. That way you're not carrying it from the sink over to the stove. You just kind of slide it forward and right onto the burner there, which is really, really sweet. And we're just gonna cover it and cook it all day, low and slow.
Okay. This is day 2 of us making our stock. Just showing you how we do it personally. As much as we are able to, we like to get our bones and feet and cartilage, all that stuff, soaking and simmering for as close to 16 hours as possible. So at the end of day 1, we strained everything and divided it into different size pots. Right, it was originally all just in this one and this one, and then we divided it into a couple others, and we took them and put them into a big chest freezer that we had a little extra space in. I lined it with a couple towels to separate the extreme heat from what was in the freezer already. Not that it made a huge difference, but so we froze it, and that allowed us to come back a few days later now. And this morning we got everything soaking. Again, I did add several extra quarts of water because evaporation, you will lose some of it. And this stuff will just get thicker and thicker and thicker.
So we're just gonna strain out the big stuff just by scooping it, and that makes it a lot easier when you're trying to strain it in the next couple steps. Okay, gotta do some straining.
I'm gonna wash this.
So the reason that we strain twice and then a third time with the cheesecloth is to just make sure it really is just the stock and we get everything else out.
A little tricky to do as my
Normally,
usual second set of hands is holding the camera, so
yes.
use my strong hands. Try to strain one more time.
So that's the stuff that you just strained. Okay. Nice. And we're straining it to get it ready for canning, which we think is still the best way to preserve it. Because then it's ready to go and it doesn't take up space in your freezer. There's the other one ready to go.
Cheesecloth. And this will get all the fine particles out.
There we go. I'll have to edit out a little of this end. It's fine.
Here's maybe what I should have done with the first pot. Add yeah. I can't pick up this one with one hand and still hold this. Although, actually, if I do it just right, this thing won't move, so we'll see. Famous last words. All right.
Smash that cheesecloth. There we go.
Once you get a little.
What I like about making chicken stock is that it also frees up our freezer space because these carcasses were in our freezer. And so now we've got more space in there.
Yeah, since processing day.
Yeah. We made broth then too, but
we're starting to run out, so we're making more. And until we process the first batch of chickens sometime early summer, we need to rely on what we have. So that's all that gross stuff I don't want in the stock. Look how beautiful that is.
Yeah.
Yep. And this is how you make the best tasting stock in the world.
In our opinion.
I've had multiple people say they've never tasted stock that's any better than ours. All right, so we've got water boiling in the pressure cooker, pressure canner. Same thing.
That's what we're going to can them in, but that's also what we sterilize these jars in.
Sterilize the jars.
So they're nice and hot and clean.
And then
the lids also.
Also
the new lids and the rims.
New lids, you can reuse the rims.
Do you want to use a ladle?
I do want to use a ladle, but let's see how it goes.
Okay. It might actually be faster than a ladle.
Make a little bit of
New
mess.
favorite method here.
A little bit.
We could probably top that off a little bit more, but
Yeah, thank you.
with a ladle.
I should have put a towel down.
Especially because like the good fat and grease in this is a little bit of a pain to clean up.
This stuff is so thick. Normally what we do to it actually is when we go to use it, we will add...
We'll dilute it with water. Yeah, 1 to 1. Sorry.
Let me say that again. This stuff is so thick and gelatinous that normally when we use it, we add equal parts water. So 1 cup broth, 1 cup water. Our pressure canner holds 7 of these jars. If they were a little bit smaller jars, they could hold, what, 14, I guess? If we double stacked them. But we're not using smaller jars, so we can't double stack it.
I like using the bigger quart jars
Yeah.
for this.
Fresh new lid, dry.
So it's really important to make sure that you dry the rims of your jars and also the lids, because that's what's going to make it have a really good seal once it's in the canner. So it's very tedious, and I think it's one of the things that turns people away from canning, but it's really not that big of a deal. And at the end of the day, now I have shelf-stable chicken stock and more room in my freezer. So canning's not that bad. It's just once you do it, you'll get used to it, and you follow the directions, and it's actually very simple. So having prepped jars, having your canner prepped, and having your lids and rims all dry once you put it, right before you put it on the jar. Now this is stock, so we're not worried about air bubbles and things like if we were doing pickles or whatnot. So this is actually one of the easiest thing that you could start with your canning. Now we're gonna put the cans into the rack, and this also makes it way easier when putting them into the canner. And we're gonna place the rack in the canner, so you're not putting individually all 7 cans in there one by one, but you're doing it all at once using the rack as your guide. And this one's cool because it kind of has little ridges on the handles, so you can rest it above the water as you slowly put it in. Now let's see if Brandon can do it all in one shot. Sometimes it gets caught on that little lip right there in the front, you'll see, so it can kind of be a little tricky. And because the microwave's above our stove, it's a little bit harder for us to try to maneuver the big canner on there, so we have to be really careful and put it in before we put it on the stove, and then just kind of shimmy it over onto the stove. So there it kind of rests with those little ridges there, and then we just slowly submerge it into the water. Now I had put way too much water in, so we're gonna have to scoop some of that water out.
There's only so much I can take out.
As long as it's over the lids just a little bit. Then we'll close the lid on the canner, and we will put the stopper over the vent, and we will can it for 25 minutes at 10 pounds. So that's gonna take a bit to build up that pressure to being 10 pounds, but it'll get there. It's gonna be at 10 pounds, this 10 pounds for a total of 25 minutes.